talk is going to be a little bit about me, but also about you, and about my sea dragon voyage. So let's begin. If this will start. It's not moving. No, it's not shifting. No. Should I? Sorry, technical difficulties here. Which one? Okay, it's blinking now. Okay. All right. I'm an artist, and one of the things that how I fell in love with the ocean is really turtles. I find them amazing, beautiful creatures. And I was really inspired by this book called Voyage of the Turtle. And you'll see the title here, and it's called In Pursuit of the Last Living Dinosaur. And it's by an author and an artist as well called Carl Savina. A little bit about the turtle itself. What really impressed me was once they're in the water and leave and born on land, they spend the rest of their life in water. And scientists have tracked a turtle that swam from Indonesia to the US and on a migration journey, and it took him a period of 647 days. There's a lot of creation myths that are related to the turtle. In Chinese mythology, the shell on its back represents the celestial stars and lights, as well as the underneath represents land and earth. In Polynesian and Hawaiian myths, he's symbol of a warrior. Of not only a gift of power, but also someone who strives to continue his journey and when it never ends. Okay. The second thing that inspired me about the ocean is phytoplankton. I love phytoplankton. I love their shapes. But what really got me about the phytoplankton is how they're one-celled microscopic plants, and they provide us with over half of the oxygen that we breathe. And once that idea was placed in my mind, it's never left, because 1 tablespoon of plankton holds about 5 million little microorganisms. Here on the left, you'll see photographs of how I got started on my company called RARE. Sorry, it's a little hidden. RARE stands for Rare Animals Really Endangered. And I started off doing just simple workshops with kids, art workshops and telling stories. Moving on, the third thing that really pushed me to fall in love with the ocean is I've lived in New York for the past 18 years of my life, and this particular river, the Hudson River, leads to the ocean. And I studied this river for about a year and a half, meeting with scientists and artists, environmentalists. And I was given the opportunity to use my artwork and meet other artists to organize a big exhibition. And this is really what pushed me into doing more than just workshops and small, educational kind of gatherings. But it stepped into a bigger audience to be able to educate the audience and also meet students and the younger generation to kind of grow the idea of telling stories about the ocean. So you'll see here this exhibition in New York called Fish Tales. And this is really a quote that inspired me and has never left. It's, in the end, we will conserve only what we love will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we have been taught. And this is by an environmentalist in Senegal. And here on the bottom, just quickly, this was my first exhibition in Taiwan, called Love Your Ocean Home. So enough about me. We're going to stop here a little bit, and we're going to do a little bit of a drawing activity and talk a little bit about you. Do you all have pieces of paper? Was that handed out to them? Oh, they don't have paper? Oh. I think they forgot about this activity. I did mention it to prepare beforehand. That's okay. Oh, that's too bad. All right, we'll just go with the flow. That's all right. That's, yeah. Okay, never mind. Really, this was a big part of the activity or the speech, but it's okay. If you imagine yourself on a piece of paper and you draw yourself in the middle, okay, we'll just use this drawing. And if you imagine around you, you draw your home. And from your home, you draw not only your family or who you're holding hands with, maybe some of your neighbors, some of your friends. And you draw another home, and this home represents your community, okay? And as you move out, think about what's next. Besides your neighborhood, then your community. If you draw your country, that is also your home. Once we move outside of the country, there's the ocean. And the ocean, too, is also a part of your home. All right? So the definition of home in the dictionary as a noun, it says, the place where one lives permanently, especially as a member of a family or a household. Right? So just think for a moment, what is outside? It's too late. It's okay. What's outside of your home? All right? I understand that they're just handing out paper. So if it's something you want to do, you can start drawing this little diagram. Right. So just take a moment and imagine what is outside of your home country. Or what do you find on the coastline of your home country? Some of you might say, well, seashells. Some of you might say rocks. But eventually you'll all say trash, garbage. What is the trash and what is the garbage? Some key questions to ask yourself. How does it get there? And why is it there? So moving forward. Something important to understand is that the ocean or water is never still. It constantly moves. And here, here's Taiwan, all right? And Taiwan has a warm current that goes up called the Kuroshio Current. And these currents, if drawn on a world scale map, you'll see there's constant movement. And here is the definition of a gyre. It's moving currents that are constantly flowing within a circular motion. And within the center, that's where you'll find stillness. And in that stillness, that's where the garbage collects. So you'll find 5 ocean gyres on the world map. We have in the Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean. It's divided by both the subtropical and the subpolar. So there's 5 gyres altogether on the map, and 5 gyres is the name of the organization that hosted the sailing trip. And they're one of the earliest organizations to really study the plastic out in the ocean. And that's where my story begins. Okay, and here we travel in June in Bermuda. We were delayed for about a day because of a tropical storm coming in. And on this trip, on this voyage, we studied the subpolar gyre and the subtropical gyre. So it's 2 gyres crossing from Bermuda to Iceland. The purpose of the voyage was really to study the microplastic that's out in the ocean and to understand the impacts that it has in both these gyres. This is my crew. There's about 14 of us, and we all have a passion in studying the environment. And we all have different backgrounds, from being artists to scientists. And you'll hear a little bit more about some of these individuals as I tell my story. Before we go any further, just a little bit about plastic. I'm not going to go into any details. Science was never my strong subject. But really, something about plastic is the makeup of it. It does carry toxins, and it's built when it is actually in the ocean. It eventually breaks down into smaller particles. And it's the particles that you need to understand is that plastic never really disappears. Well, where does the plastic come from is a question that's often asked by many people. And really, 60 to 80% of it comes from land. That eventually goes through our storm drains. And you'll hear more details about it from other speakers. And another last question people ask is, where is the garbage patch? There is no garbage patch, really. It's not really a patch itself. It's not something solid. As I mentioned, that it's made up of, in the ocean, plastic breaks down. So it's really something that can't be cleaned up. It's these microplastics that are floating, that get tangled, and it's just coming up with a solution is still in the works. So what did we do on this expedition? You'll see here on the top is Marcus. He's the founder of 5Gyres. And here we are with one of his contraptions he designed called a vertical trawl. And this down here is an actual manta trawl itself. And we're pulling it in after drifting in the water for a certain period of time, collecting samples. And that's how the samples are collected. But before we start off our journey, we also conducted some beach surveys just along the island itself. And here you'll see in the background all the pieces of microplastic. And this is what we find from the samples that we collect. Just a little bit about the purpose of our trip. Not only was it to do some trawling, but it was also to do some observations and also study some larger pieces of plastic that we found. It's been known either turtles or even certain fishes actually bite the plastic and leave marks on the plastic, especially the triggerfish itself. So we've been collecting specifically to see some larger plastics that have bite marks. And the other reason also is to use this data to collect and put out survey microplastics. Just a little bit about adapting to boat life. There's this beautiful quote by a wonderful singer, and it says, "Hark, now hear the sailors cry, smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystic." And this is really what represents very well the magic of the ocean. Here on the top is our skipper. He led our boat, and he spent a lot of time telling us to stay out of the kill zone, and he talked a lot about the 100 different ways to die on a boat. He was trying to remind us to be very careful and just be very precautious about where we are. So we pretty much had to wear our safety gear 100% of the time that we were on the deck. And here below, you will find our first mate, John Wright. So on this boat, we actually learned a lot about sailing. It's just some simple terms like apparent wind, the direction and speed of the wind felt by the crew. These were all new terms for us, and understanding how important the wind was driving this small vehicle out at sea, a vessel. And that's what really struck me, was that we were left to the elements. Here on the bottom, this is us, and this is pretty much where we spent most of our time reading or doing work and eating. A little bit about the boat itself, the Sea Dragon. It was built in UK, and it is a sailing vessel. And it's built for long voyages. And it slept about 14 people, so accommodated all of us very well. And it's one of the things the captain says is that I trust this vessel, and that made us all feel very safe. You'll see here on the top, that's most probably one of the worst weathers that we've had, when we've actually come across large swells. They're about 10 to 12 feet swells. And we're basically living at a 45-degree angle. And being on that's one of the challenges, is adapting to living life at a different angle. And not only that, but also it did take me a couple of days before I got over my seasickness. So this here on the bottom is a photograph of maybe the one time we saw the ocean at complete stillness. It was like a swimming pool. And it was one of the few times that we were allowed to take off our safety vests and jump into the water. And here is where this large item here, this is what made us stop our boat. It was a fishing derelict, kind of debris that we found just floating, and attached to it is a lot of just bunches of nets, and obviously it seemed like it was tangled, so one of the fishing vessels just cut it off and just let it float. And that's one of the largest items you'll ever find, are just floating fishing items. They are swimming, I'm not even sure how many feet deep, but below them are barracudas. And if you know what barracudas is, they're pretty large fish. And they have very, very sharp teeth. And I was not one of them that was in the water. Here below, you'll find one of our teammates. He freelances for National Geographic. And there was a period of 10 days where we were stuck just in very, very deep fog. And we could not see the stars, we could not see the sunrise. It was just incredibly thick fog. And here's him kind of looking for adventure on the boat. And he climbed up the sailing mast to the top to take some photographs. And we were broken up into team crews to be on watch on top of the, on deck. And having those moments, just be you and the ocean in whether it's 12 a.m. or 2 a.m. or even 4 a.m. It's kind of being under just Mother Nature, surrounded by nothing but really blue. And that's what really amazed me. Just the isolation and understanding that it's just you and the ocean, and there is no other land. So going back to the idea of the drawing with you in the middle, this was me, this was my crew, this was my family, and this was my home. Outside of that, my community, it was the fishes, it was the birds. And greater than that, it was just ocean. It was just stillness. It was just clouds. So my second definition of home in the dictionary as a verb, and it's funny because it pertains to an animal, it says return by instinct to its territory after leaving it. The example they give is a dozen geese homing to their summer resting grounds. And that really struck me. There's a beautiful quote by David Thoreau, a wonderful writer, and it says, "A field of water betrays a spirit that is in the air. It is continually receiving new life and motion from above, and it is intermediate between land and sky." And that was it, land and sky. Here you see a photograph of me driving the boat. But one thing I understood, I might be driving the boat, but it's Mother Nature that's driving us. And we were very reliant on her and what she felt that day. And some days we would barely move. That's what struck me. Here's some visiting community of dolphins. They were also part of my home when I was on the boat. And that was a lot of fun to see them. And one day we decided to try out our fishing skills, and we actually caught a tuna. And when we opened up its stomach, we actually didn't, what we found was that he'd just eaten a little squid, you know? And that fish was actually very big, and it fed us pretty much for the whole 2 weeks, so we ate little by little. So that kind of, here's a picture of us in the fog. You'll see that. We could barely see a few feet up. Some days we couldn't even see the water itself. And here's Marcus taking a sample. And after the trawling, we would pour it into a sieve, all the contents from the trawl. And in order to keep it, he kind of cleaned it out and see what we could find. And the preliminary results, basically we found that each sample that we took did contain plastic. So we did here's just some simple stats, you know, the number of beach studies and surveys we took. And just looking at some of the last photographs here, you'll see this is actually bread. Someone looked at it and said, "Is it a sample you collected?" Out in the water, one of the things that, especially when we moved closer to Iceland, the weather did get very, very cold. And it got cold pretty quick. So we were wearing our layers, and there were days when we would actually experience some snowy rain. And one of the things, and something I remember Tracy saying, is looking forward to bread. On those cold days, just something simple, whether it's a hot chocolate or tea or just fresh bread. You know, that's all we needed to soothe our soul. And it goes to show how it's really the simple things in life, the warmth and the comfort, that really, during some cold moments, that's all you need. So some of you might be saying, well, what does this voyage have to do with me? I'm not going to go into the science aspect again, it's not my strong point. But basically, since plastic does carry toxins, if you imagine in this simple diagram the accumulation of the toxins when it moves from the smaller organisms, when the smaller organisms get fed by the fish, and who eventually eats it, but us and also birds itself. So how does the plastic affect, you know, the environment? Well, you'll see the turtle, this image of a turtle. This is something, these are two photographs that 5Gyres are very known for. This is a turtle that they found that got stuck in a milk jug ring when he was young, and he could never get out, and he just grew. He still grew, and it did damage his back, but he was still able to survive. This particular image is on one of Marcus's raft journeys, and in it, when they ran out of food, they cut open the stomach of the rainbow runner, and they found all these smaller pieces of plastic and microplastic. I don't think they ate it. So this is Marcus's conclusion. I'll share it with you. The Sea Dragon safely carried 14 crew 2,400 nautical miles from Bermuda to Iceland. Our research goals were met despite cold and rain along the way. We arrived in Iceland after 21 days at sea. It was a true adventure. Crew members walk away with tools they can use to become ambassadors for ocean conservation, specifically on the plastic pollution issue. You each have a sample of microplastic collected from Tobacco Bay in Bermuda, and that sample's outside for you to take a look at, along with some other things that I brought. With this, combined with shared research papers and presentations, and mostly your own experience, you can now make changes in your community. We have accomplished something great together, fair winds and following seas. One of the reasons why I shared this with you, because going back to the number of phytoplankton that's in that tablespoon, although at times it may seem that we are very small, if you imagine the might of this phytoplankton and what it does for us, imagine if all of us were on that spoon. You know, what changes can we make? So you too belong in this community, regardless whether you're on that boat or not. It all starts from learning, and it all starts from sharing and telling stories. Just to wrap up a little bit, this is our crew looking a little somber. I think we were all a little sad that the journey was ending. We did have a small mishap, one accident. You'll see that this girl, she broke her arm and she was out in sea for 3 days with a cast. This is an image of Iceland when we just before to land, and that's our welcome party. And I have to say, it wasn't a